I wasn't supposed to be home until Thursday. That's the part I keep coming back to, even now. If the load had gone through like scheduled, if the weather hadn't shut down the highway outside of Memphis, if my dispatcher hadn't called me at 2 in the morning and told me to turn the rig around and deadhead back to the yard, none of it would have happened the way it did. I would have pulled into the driveway on Thursday evening like always, tired and stiff from 3 days behind the wheel, and I wouldn't have known. Not right away. Maybe not for a long time, but the highway closed. And I came home on Tuesday instead. My name is Thomas Ward. I'm 43 years old. I've been driving long-haul trucks since I was 26, which means I've spent roughly half my adult life sleeping in a cab, eating at diners off the interstate, and watching the miles pile up while the rest of the world went about its business without me. It's not a glamorous life, but it paid the mortgage on a 3-bedroom house in Clarksville, Tennessee, and for 9 years, it kept my family fed and my daughter in ballet lessons and new sneakers every fall. My daughter's name is Lily. She was 8 years old when this happened. Her mother, my ex-wife Rachel, had remarried 2 years earlier. His name was Victor Price. He was 38, worked in HVAC sales, and wore the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. I never liked him. I told myself that was just jealousy, just the bitterness of a divorced man watching another man sleep in the house he used to own. I told myself to be the bigger person, to be civil, to focus on Lily and not on the sick feeling I got every time I pulled out of that driveway and left my daughter standing in the front yard waving goodbye. I should have listened to that feeling a long time ago. The highway closure happened just outside of Memphis around 11:30 at night. State troopers were turning everyone around, jackknife, tanker, hazmat situation, nobody getting through for at least 8 hours. My dispatcher called, told me to bring the truck back empty. They'd reroute the load Wednesday morning. I was 4 hours from home. I could have gotten a room at the truck stop and waited it out. Most guys would have. But I thought about my own bed, about a shower that wasn't a gas station stall, and I turned the rig west and started driving home. I got to the yard a little after 3 in the morning, dropped the truck, climbed into my pickup, and drove to my apartment. I slept until 10. Then I had a thought. Rachel had texted me the previous Friday saying Lily had a cold and wouldn't be at my place for the weekend visit. I'd been disappointed but not alarmed. Kids get sick. But sitting there in my apartment on a Tuesday morning with 2 unexpected days off, I thought I'd drive over and surprise Lily. Bring her some soup, maybe rent a movie. I texted Rachel first. No response. I tried calling. It rang out. I figured she was at work. She did part-time bookkeeping for a dentist's office on Tuesday mornings. Lily would be home with Victor, since she was supposedly still sick. I decided to stop by anyway. I had a key to the side door from before the divorce. Rachel had never asked for it back. I pulled into the driveway at 11:17 in the morning. Victor's truck was in the driveway. The house looked quiet. I knocked on the front door and waited. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. I walked around the side of the house toward the backyard, thinking maybe they were outside. That's when I heard it. It was faint. So faint that I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. A sound like something between a cough and a word, coming from somewhere low and muffled, like a voice trying to push through concrete. I stopped walking. I stood completely still in the side yard and listened. It came again. It was my daughter's voice, saying my name, not calling out clearly, not screaming, just a small, exhausted sound, Daddy barely loud enough to hear, like she'd been saying it for a long time, and most of the air had gone out of the word. It was coming from the basement. The Price house had an exterior basement access, a set of slanted metal doors set into the ground on the north side of the house, the kind you lift up and walk down into. I'd helped install a water heater down there the summer before the divorce. I walked to them now, and I saw the padlock, a heavy combination lock, snapped shut through the hasp. I put my hand flat on the metal door and I said, "Lily." "Baby, it's Daddy. Can you hear me?" There was a sound on the other side of the door, a scraping. Then her voice again, clearer this time, cracked and dry. "Daddy, Daddy, I'm here. I'm down here." I don't have a clean memory of what happened in the next 60 seconds. I know I tried the lock and it didn't open. I know I went back to my truck and got the tire iron out of the bed. I know I hit the hasp 4 times before the screws pulled out of the wood frame and the whole latch assembly tore free. I pulled the doors open and I went down those stairs in the dark. The basement smelled like must and something else urine, I realized. the smell of a child who had been down there long enough to have no other choice. There was one small window at ground level, maybe 8 inches tall, and the October light came through it gray and thin. In the far corner, on a folded moving blanket, my daughter was curled on her side, looking at me. She was wearing the same pajamas she'd had on the last time I saw her, 4 days ago. Her lips were cracked, her eyes were glassy. She had her arms wrapped around her own knees, and she was shaking, even though the basement wasn't cold. "Daddy," she said. "Is that really you?" I crossed the basement in 3 steps. I picked her up off that floor and held her against my chest, and she went completely limp, like a child who has been holding herself together through sheer will and has finally been given permission to let go. She didn't cry. She just pressed her face into my neck and breathed. I carried her up the stairs and into the daylight. Victor was standing at the back door of the house. He'd heard the noise, apparently. He was in sweatpants and a t-shirt, holding a coffee mug, squinting at me with an expression that took me a moment to identify. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't alarm. It was irritation. "What the hell are you doing here?" he said. I was still holding Lily. I could feel how light she was, lighter than she should have been. I could feel her ribs under my hands. "How long?" I said. My voice came out very quiet. "How long has she been down there?" He shifted his weight. He set the coffee mug down on the step railing. She was being disciplined. She broke. "How long?" He looked at Lily, then back at me. "Since Friday night." Friday night. It was Tuesday morning. I did the math without wanting to. 92 hours. Nearly 4 days. My 8-year-old daughter had been locked in a basement for 92 hours. I called 911. I made myself do it right then, standing in that backyard, because some part of me understood that if I put the phone down and dealt with Victor first, I would do something that could not be undone. I told the dispatcher my daughter had been locked in a basement without food or water for 4 days. I gave the address. I was told units were on their way. Victor tried to speak twice while I was on the phone. I looked at him both times, and he stopped. The Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies arrived in 11 minutes. The paramedics came 2 minutes after that. The paramedic who took Lily from my arms was a woman with short red hair and calm, efficient hands. And when she got Lily onto the stretcher and did her initial assessment, she looked up at me with an expression I won't forget. It was the face of a professional who has trained for years to stay neutral and who is not, in this moment, succeeding. They took Lily to Tenova Healthcare. The ER doctor, a heavy-set man named Dr. Caldwell, who spoke softly and looked at the floor when he delivered hard news, told me that Lily was severely dehydrated, that her blood pressure was lower than it should be, and that she had bruising on her left forearm, and both shins consistent with defensive impact. He said she had likely lost between 4 and 5 pounds in the time she was confined. He said that another 12 hours in those conditions would have been, and here he paused, chose his word carefully, dangerous. He said she was going to be okay. He said it twice. And the second time he said it, he looked up from the floor and looked me in the eye, and I think he was saying it as much for himself as for me. I sat with Lily while they got an IV into her arm. She held my hand and looked at the ceiling. After a while, she said, "Victor said you wouldn't come. He said you were far away and you didn't know." "I came," I said. "I kept calling for you," she said, "even when I didn't think you could hear." I had to step outside the room for a few minutes after that. I stood in the hallway with my back against the wall, and I breathed. A nurse walked past and pretended not to notice. Rachel arrived at the hospital 40 minutes after I called her. She came through the ER doors, looking pale and shaken, and when she saw me in the waiting room, she started crying before she even said anything. She kept saying she didn't know. She didn't know it was that bad. Victor had told her Lily was fine, just being punished for breaking his television remote. That was the infraction. Apparently, that had earned my daughter 4 days in a basement. A television remote. I asked her when she had last checked on Lily herself. She couldn't answer me clearly. Somewhere in the telling and the crying and the pieces that didn't fit together, I understood that she had known Lily was down there. She had known, and she had taken Victor's word, that it was fine, that it was temporary, that it was handled. She had slept in her bed 3 floors above her daughter for 4 nights, and told herself it was okay. I went back to Lily's room and I stayed there. The detective assigned to the case a woman named Sergeant Diana Morrow, short and direct, with a notepad she wrote in without looking down, interviewed Lily at the hospital that afternoon with a child advocacy specialist present. Lily told them about the lock, about the dark, about the one time someone had opened the door she thought it was Sunday and left a bottle of water and a sleeve of crackers at the top of the steps without coming down. She told them about Victor locking her in the basement once before, for one night, 2 months earlier. She told them she hadn't told me because Victor said I would be angry at her. That detail sat in my chest like a stone. Victor was taken into custody that evening. He was charged with child abuse and false imprisonment. Rachel was brought in for questioning. The next 48 hours were a blur of statements and calls from the DA's office and my attorney and my mother, who drove up from Nashville and appeared in the hospital room doorway, looking like she hadn't slept since I called her. Lily was kept in the hospital for 2 nights for monitoring and rehydration. On the second afternoon, she was well enough to sit up in bed and eat hospital jello, and she told me about how she had kept herself from being too scared in the dark. She had counted things. The steps down into the basement. 11. The cinder blocks in the wall she could see from the blanket. 43. The times each day she could hear the refrigerator humming through the floor above her. Too many to count, but she tried. She was 8 years old, and she had counted cinder blocks in the dark to stay calm. I want you to understand something. I am not a man who acts on impulse. I spent 17 years driving a 60,000-pound vehicle on public roads, which requires a certain discipline about patience, about thinking ahead, about the consequences of sudden decisions. I do not have a temper in the way that some men do. I have always believed, more or less, that the system works, that if you report the right things to the right people, something happens. I reported everything. I cooperated fully. I gave every statement, attended every hearing, answered every question from every investigator. I did everything right. And then I found out, 2 weeks after Lily came home to my apartment with a stuffed bear from the gift shop and a follow-up appointment with a child therapist named Dr. Susan Fisk, that Victor Price had posted bond, that his attorney was arguing the basement was a finished space with adequate ventilation, and that the duration of confinement, while regrettable, did not meet the legal threshold for felony child abuse under the current statute, that there was a reasonable possibility the charges would be reduced. I sat with that information for 3 days. On a Saturday morning, while Lily was at her grandmother's house in Nashville, I drove to the address where Victor was staying, a buddy of his, a split level on the east side of town. I had looked up the address in the bond paperwork, which is public record. I parked down the street, and I waited. He came out around 9 in the morning to check his mailbox, wearing jeans and a fleece vest, looking rested. I walked up his buddy's driveway. I want to be accurate about what happened, because accuracy matters here. I did not beat Victor Price. I did not threaten to kill him. What I did was this. I walked up to him while he was standing at the mailbox, and I said his name, and when he turned around and saw me, I watched the color leave his face, and I told him, very calmly, that I was there to show him something. The buddy's house had a storage shed in the backyard. Older construction, wood frame, no windows. I had a combination padlock in my jacket pocket that I had purchased the night before at a hardware store. I told Victor to walk to the shed. He did. I think the calm in my voice scared him more than shouting would have. I told him to go inside. He did. I put the padlock on the door. Then I sat down in a lawn chair in that backyard, 20 feet from the shed door, and I waited. I sat there for 4 hours. Victor yelled for the first hour. He begged for a while after that. He went quiet near the end. I did not bring him water. I did not bring him food. When 4 hours had passed, I opened the lock and I opened the door, and I looked at him sitting on the floor of that shed in the October afternoon, and I said, "That's 4 hours." She was in there for 92. Think about the math. Then I walked back to my truck and I drove home. I won't tell you that what I did was right. I won't stand here and say that a man locking another man in a shed for 4 hours is justice, or healthy, or something I'm proud of. I know what it is. It's a father who ran out of faith in the system, and who needed for the man who hurt his daughter to have a small, insufficient taste of what that felt like. I'm not asking for anyone's approval. I'm just telling you what happened. Victor called the police. Of course he did. I was questioned, and my attorney was present, and nothing rose to the level of criminal charges. Victor had not been physically harmed. The shed was not locked for a dangerous duration, and given the circumstances, the responding officers were not exactly breaking their backs to build a case. One of them, an older deputy named Harris, who had 2 kids of his own, looked me in the eye when the interview was over and said, "Mr. Ward, I'd advise you not to make a habit of this." The tone in which he said it was not entirely disapproving. What that day did do, unexpectedly, was change something in the DA's office. Victor's attorney had been quietly confident about the charge reduction. After the story got out, and it did get out, because these things always do in a mid-sized Tennessee city, the DA's office found its backbone. The Child Advocacy Center submitted a formal impact report. Dr. Caldwell submitted a medical affidavit. Dr. Fisk submitted her assessment of Lily's psychological state. The story ran in the local paper with a photograph of those basement doors, padlock still hanging from the hasp. Victor Price went to trial 4 months later. His attorney argued mitigation. The prosecutor, a woman named Assistant D.A. Holloway, who wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and spoke to the jury like she was talking to a room full of intelligent adults, put Lily's medical records on the screen and let them speak. She put Dr. Caldwell on the stand. She put Sergeant Morrow on the stand. She did not put Lily on the stand. That was by design, and I was grateful. Victor was convicted of felony child abuse and felony false imprisonment. He was sentenced to 6 years in the Tennessee Department of Correction. His attorney filed an appeal. The appeal was denied. He is currently serving his sentence at a facility in northeastern Tennessee. He will be eligible for parole consideration in 3 years. I have already begun working with a victim's advocate on a formal statement for the parole hearing. Rachel entered into a plea agreement. She pled guilty to a charge of child endangerment, received a suspended sentence and 2 years of supervised probation, and was ordered to complete a parenting assessment program. She lost primary custody of Lily. I have full physical custody. Rachel has supervised visitation rights, which Lily exercises at her own pace, which currently means once a month at a neutral location. That is Lily's choice, and I follow her lead. I want to tell you about the day I brought Lily home. Not to the hospital, to my apartment. For good, the day after the custody order was finalized. I had painted her room while she was staying with my mother. Yellow, because she'd told me once that yellow was the color of being awake in a good way. I had put up a string of star-shaped lights above the window. I had bought her a bookshelf and let her arrange the books herself, which she did with a seriousness that made my chest ache. She stood in the doorway of that yellow room for a long time, looking at it. Then she walked in and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the stars above the window. "No lock on the door?" she said. "No lock on the door," I said. She nodded. She seemed to be confirming something to herself. Then she said, "Okay, I think I can sleep here." That was 10 months ago. She is 9 now. She has gone back to ballet. She sees Dr. Fisk every 2 weeks, and according to Dr. Fisk, she is processing things in a way that is, given everything, genuinely healthy. She still sleeps with the light on in the hallway. She does not like the door fully closed at night. These things, Dr. Fisk tells me, may change gradually with time and safety. I still drive long-haul routes. I had to. It's my income, my livelihood, the thing that pays for the apartment and the ballet lessons and Dr. Fisk's hourly rate. But I restructured my routes. I no longer take loads that keep me away for more than 3 days at a time. My dispatcher, a patient man named Glenn, who has worked with me for 11 years, made it work without complaint. My mother comes down from Nashville on the nights I'm not home. My daughter is never left in the care of someone I have not personally vetted down to their address history. Some people have asked me if I regret the shed. They ask it carefully, like they're handing me something fragile, watching to see how I hold it. My honest answer is that I don't know how to regret something that came from the truest, most unfiltered part of who I am. I am not sure regret is even the right category. I know it wasn't legal strategy. I know it wasn't smart. I know there is a version of events where it made things worse. But I also know that I sat in that lawn chair in the October sun for 4 hours, and I felt something that I think was the closest I have ever come to being completely honest about what had been done to my child, about what I was capable of, about the places inside a parent that have nothing to do with rationality or procedure. I am not proud of what I did, but I am not ashamed of why I did it. That is the most honest thing I can tell you. What I am proud of, the only part of this story I hold cleanly and without complication, is that I came home on Tuesday instead of Thursday. I tell Lily this sometimes. Not often, and not in a way that makes it about me. But sometimes, when she's had a hard night or a hard day at school, and she climbs into my truck after pickup, looking smaller than she should. I'll tell her. I was supposed to be in Memphis. The highway closed. I came home anyway. And she'll look at me in the way she's been doing lately, a little older than she used to look, a little more careful, and she'll say, "I know, Dad." A few weeks ago I was helping her with a school project. She had to write 3 sentences about someone she admired. I assumed she would write about a singer she liked, or maybe her ballet teacher. I stepped out of the room to get her a glass of water, and when I came back she had written this. My dad drove home in the middle of the night. He heard me even when I thought no one could. He showed me that someone will always come. She showed me the sentences and asked if they were good enough. I told her they were perfect. She asked why my voice sounded funny. I told her I had a little something in my throat. She accepted that. She is 9 years old, and she counted cinder blocks in the dark, and she still believes that someone will always come. I do not know how she held on to that. I do not know where that kind of faith lives in a child, or how it survives, or what it takes to keep it from going out entirely. But I know this. Every time I pull out of the driveway for a run, she stands at the window and watches until the truck is out of sight. And every time I come back on schedule, early, in the middle of the night, in any weather, she is there, waiting, counting the times each day she can hear me coming. I always come back. I always will.